meeting for July the 6th. And roll call and posting the agenda, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Basua. Councilmember Lopez.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem McDonald.
Here.
Councilmember Madrigal.
Here.
Councilmember Turan.
Here.
Mayor Zaragoza.
Here.
Thank you. The posting of the agenda. The amended agenda for this meeting was posted on City Hall Bulletin Board on July 2nd, 2021. Thank you.
And my understanding is that Councilman Perello and Basua are going to be joining us in a few minutes. They're running late. And also, I don't have any public comments for this item. And closed session, Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. City Council will recess to a closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, subsection D1, to confer with its attorneys. The matter being discussed is in re Purdue Pharma LP et al. City Council will also recess to a closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, subdivision D2. Based on existing facts and circumstances, there is significant exposure to litigation against the city in one potential case regarding the payment of fire personnel employee overtime under the Fair Labor Standards Act. The City Council will also recess to a closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, Annual Evaluation of Public Employees, City Manager, and City Attorney.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. So we're going to closed session and we'll return back for the ceremonials at 6 p.m. Thank you. We're going to closed session. to the opening ceremonies. Mr. City Attorney, do we have any announcements?
Thank you, Mayor. There are no announcements out of closed session tonight.
Thank you so much. So my opening ceremony here, we have the Madam Clerk. Do we have to roll call again, or we're okay with that? We already did. Okay. So our next item is going to be the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States. Please follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. Our next item that we have is a ceremonial item, and this is a presentation of proclamation designating the month of July as Park and Rec Commission. We're going to have our Parks Manager Kevin Thompson available, and also Angela Whitecomb. So let me go ahead and share this proclamation with you at this time. The Proclamation Recreation Month, July 2021, whereas parks and recreation programs are an integral part of the communities throughout this country, including Oxnard. And whereas our parks and recreation are of vital importance to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities, ensuring the health of all residents and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of the community and the region. Whereas parks and recreation programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic diseases, provides therapeutic recreation services for those who are mentally and physically disabled, and also improve the mental and emotional health of all residents. Whereas parks and recreation programs increase a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas parks and recreation areas are fundamental to the environmental of well-being of our community, and where parks and recreations, natural recreation areas improve water quality, protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve the quality of air we breathe, and provide vegetative buffers to development and produce habitat for wildlife. And where our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And where the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as a Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas the City of Oxnard recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now, therefore, I, John C. Zaragoza, Mayor of the City of Oxnard, do hereby proclaim July 2021 as Park and Recreation Month in the City of Oxnard, and encourage all residents to enjoy and recognize the social, physical, mental, economic, environmental, and community benefits derived from the City of Oxnard Parks and Recreation Commission. In witness thereof, I set my hand to cause the great seal of the City of Oxnard to be affixed on this July 6th day of July 2021. And we do have Kevin Thompson or Angela Whitecomb who'd like to share a couple of words. And we are going to have this this proclamation ready for you tomorrow morning at our city manager's office. Okay, so we have Kevin, or do we have Angela? Both?
I would like to invite Chair Whitcomb to speak if she would like.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Thompson, who are you inviting to speak?
Whitcomb.
One moment.
Angela Whitcomb.
Ms. Whitcomb, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, wonderful.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Angela Whitecomb, and I'm your Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Commission Chair, and I am so pleased about this proclamation. Although I do not speak for the Commission tonight, I am sure my fellow commissioners would agree. Our community is strengthened by our strong parks and recreation departments. I am happy to see this council's commitment to bring our parks back to a place of beauty and safety that we can all be proud of. Our dilapidated playgrounds are being replaced with all-inclusive playgrounds, and our lawns are being mowed and our gardens cleaned up. Our recreation department is outstanding and is doing many things to bring our community together. They are putting on 3 skate nights on the 4th floor of the parking structure starting July 16th, a 5K run on July 15th, and reopening our senior centers to encourage healthy living and fellowship. I look forward to building on our partnership and making Oxnard's parks a draw to our community, as well as building an even more robust recreation department for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. Kevin, you'd like to share a couple more words?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to show the Park Division's joy in this proclamation, and that we look forward to working with the Parks Commission in making these wonderful changes happen and to better serve our community.
Thank you, Kevin. And I just want to share with you personally, and I'm sure that the City Council and our residents are really happy with what you're doing now with our parks, with our gateways, with our mediums, you know, and this is really, really great. And as mentioned before, this is really beneficial for our community, for the well-being and for our children, our homes, and of course, all our families. And thank you so much for the good work that you're doing. Thank you. And again, this proclamation is going to be ready for you tomorrow morning there at the city manager's office. Thank you again so much.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And also, we do have Renee Rakestraw, Community Services Manager, available if she would like to speak as well.
Okay, I'd like to share a couple of words where...
Yes, thank you and good evening, Mayor Zaragoza, Mayor Pro Tem McDonald, and council members. And thank you to our Parks Manager, Kevin Thompson, and our Parks and Rec Commission Chair, Angela Whitecomb, for their comments. I have a few words from Recreation and Community Services Division. We take the month of July to recognize the impacts of park and recreation within our community. It is also important to promote building strong, vibrant, and resilient communities through the power of recreational programming, and to recognize the recreation professionals who have dedicated their career to the betterment of our community, along with hundreds of part-time and seasonal workers and volunteers. Without these individuals, we would not have the opportunity to not only provide impactful programs, but also respond as we did during the COVID-19 pandemic. The can-do attitude of the team has proven Oxnard residents are our priority, and the services provided are vital for our community. From youth and senior centers to city corps and Pell to vaccine sites and food distributions, no task has been left undone. In accepting this proclamation, we encourage everyone to reflect on the exponential value of parks and recreation. As we continue to navigate through the COVID-19 pandemic, we thank you for your continued support and patience. Many of our programs and activities have made a return, as Commissioner Whitcomb had mentioned. Make sure to visit our website, oxnardrec.org, and follow us on social media at oxnardrec for the most up-to-date information on available programs. Thank you to Council for recognizing Parks and Rec the month of July. Now I'll pass it back to you, Mayor.
Thank you so much. And before I go to Councilmember Teran, I just want to tell our public, our residents, to help our employees, to help when they go to parks, make sure that they clean up after they have a nice barbecue, make sure that they report items that are too big to be taken care of to our city at 385, 8500. So that's just really, really important that we do that to help each other out, keep our city nice and clean. And thank you again to all our city employees and Parks and Rec. and also the Parks and Recreation, and also our parks individual and the Public Works personnel that's out there cleaning our parks. Thank you so much for those kind words. Councilmember Tehran.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank our chair of Parks, Recreation, Community Services Commission, Ms. Whitecomb. I had the fortune and pleasure to serve alongside her when I was a Parks and Rec Commissioner. I'd like to thank Mr. Thompson and Ms. Rakestraw for all of their work and for being here and giving the public an idea, just a glimpse of some of the things that you all do and how that provides an improvement in quality of life for the average resident. And I just wanted to say that I am such a proponent of our Cultural Community Services Department and Parks and Recreation Services. They do so much for this city. We have such great staff in all of our departments, but I think that that Parks and Rec is one of those departments that is very transparent when it's doing a great job. When things are going very well, we don't see and we don't notice the things that are happening until we really look back and reflect on it. When we look at the recreation side of things, the offerings that they have pre-COVID and now post-COVID for opportunities for inclusion and for meaningful participation for our community's youth are beyond important and really are one of the first stepping stones to preventing young people from making negative decisions that will impact their future. On the park side of things, if people go to our parks that we just had approved for continued mowing and increased or return to services for their landscaping, you'll see the difference in what it looks like when a park is unable to be attended to and what it is now and the effect that that has on a community. And our park staff are invaluable to our community as well. People certainly noticed when restrooms are not able to be opened. And they noticed when we didn't have enough physical bodies to cut the grass or to pick up and take away the trash. And so now that we do, I hope that folks will see the difference that that has on a community and the vibe of the community and its community health. And as the mayor had mentioned, please do our part to also help them in that effort. If you see trash, I always impress on my kids and on myself to pick it up, put it in the trash. If the trash is overflowing, then there's other trash cans, or I'll take it with me if it's something that I'm trying to throw away myself. So all this to say that I truly appreciate the work that all of you do, and this recognition for the month of July 2021 is more than deserved, and much more is deserved as well. So thank you all very much. And thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Our next item is really, really important. We're going to recognize some special police officers that received merit of awards and so forth. So I'm going to call in the chief, but I'm going to mention first of all that we have Detective Jeff Kay that was recognized by the Peace Officers Association of Ventura County as Investigator of the Year recipient. And also we have two officers, Corbin Haynes and Alex Smith, who were also were recognized with the Medal of Merit Awards recipients by the Ventura County Association. So, Chief, you want to share additional information on this? Really, we're really proud of those three officers, that you're going to recognize tonight, and we're going to have the accommodations at City Hall tomorrow for them. But go ahead, Chief. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor. Can you hear me okay from where I'm at?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to first start by thanking Mayor and Council for recognizing the officers in this forum this evening. The Peace Officers Association of Ventura County is a combination of representatives from a variety of Ventura County agencies, and their purpose is to promote interdepartmental cooperation and professional relationships between the agencies. So every other year, they hold an awards ceremony that recognizes officers for valor, for merit, and for excellence. And because of COVID-19, the service or the awards function was canceled. So what we ended up doing was giving them their awards, these three officers, in a very private and informal ceremony earlier actually in June. I'm going to, rather than read the commendations to you. I'd like to actually just kind of relate the stories of what they did. Officers Corbin and officers Alex Smith. Alex Smith is actually on vacation, unable to be with us this evening. They were both actually at the Borderline Grill during the night of November 7th, 2018. And as I go further into this, note that all these stories are based on terrible circumstances and terrible situations that these officers have had to deal with. And on the night of the 7th of November, Officer Corbin Hames was standing near the dance floor in the Borderline Grill when shots rang out. He then began to push, recognizing what had happened, he began to push their patrons away from where they recognized the suspect to be. Corbin used a bar stool to break one of the windows. And if anybody has seen how that structure is built, there's some windows that kind of have a drop off. After breaking this window, he assisted many of the patrons outside of this window and down to the ground and out of the building. Once he got outside, he provided medical aid to injured patrons and also continued to assist with the victims. Now, of note, both officers I mentioned were off duty at this bar. They were unarmed and they had no other means to defend themselves. So they, throughout the incident, Officer Hames was able to provide the sheriff's deputies and first responders with information about what was going inside the business. Officer Alex Smith was there. He was also with Officer Hames that night. He heard the distinct sound of gunfire. And when responding to this, he started to herd people over to get them to cover. And as this happened, the person that was standing next to him actually was stumbled as if she had been struck by the gunfire. He grabbed this person and escorted her out of the bar. When Officer Smith got to the window of the business, he punched the glass and breached the window to create an escape route for other panicked patrons during this time. And then once getting outside, Officer Smith helped establish what they call a collection point for injured and those people that had escaped from the building. And also, like Corbin Hames, had helped with giving the responding deputies and officers from a variety of departments directions and information as to what had happened inside the bar. Very terrible situation. And the actions of both of these officers unequivocally, and I'll say this unequivocally, undoubtedly saved many lives of patrons that were there that night. And that is why they are to be commended for their actions. Now, I'll finish with Detective Jeff Kay. I've known Detective Jeff Kay for quite some. If you go to our webpage, but Jeff has been the lead investigator on a number of cold cases which have been solved, some cases going back to the early 80s. In 2018, Detective Kay became involved in the case of a 3-year-old Kimberly Lopez Chavez, or Chavez Lopez. She had disappeared in 2015 and it was off of the radar, but Jeff and the detectives felt that there was something very wrong here. And a very tenacious investigation actually led to confessions from the parents that they had actually killed the little girl and disposed of her body in Mexico. The father later pled guilty to this as well as the grandmother of poor little Kimberly. What was interesting about this case is that it was prosecuted without actually finding a body to go along with the case. So he actually presented this case to the the California Homicide Investigators Association in Las Vegas, which is a pretty notable achievement to have to do such a complex and very trying investigation. So in short, Mayor and Council, I will just tell you that these awards here have been a long time coming, and they reflect the courage, the selflessness, the skill, and the dedication of our detectives. And these officers rose to the occasion under some very difficult circumstances, and they performed exceptionally well. In short, I am just very, very proud to be part of the same organization as them.
Thank you, Chief. And it's really, thank you again to Jeff Kay and Corbin Hames and also Alex Smith. Those are notorious type things that happen, and they were known across the U.S. and across the world for that matter, but we don't be known for that. But however, we thank them again for being the recipients and being there to assist the public. And thank you so much, Chief. And again, Jeff, Corbin, and Alex, thank you very much for your service. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you to the officers for giving you your 110%. That I know it sounds cliche, but this is really the DNA of public safety folks. This is what they do. They do it without regard for their own safety or anything else other than the safety of the people that they work for. So these are prestigious awards. You're very deserving of them. And thank you for all that you do for our community in our area.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilman Perrello.
I wish congratulations to the individuals that have won the awards and their family. It reflects on your families also, but it also reflects on the men and women that you work with. In this modern age, a few days after the 4th of July, when with the internet and social media is back and forth that the PD didn't do anything, you guys go above and beyond. We understand it's your job, but this is above and beyond. You're be a terrific credit, and it reflects on the city of Oxnard for having you work for us. Thank you. Be safe.
Thank you. Councilmember Turan.
Thank you, Mayor. My colleagues have already said quite a few words. I just want to send congratulations as well, and thank you to the recipients for your work for our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, man. Thank you again, Chief, and your men for excellent work. Thank you for it. Okay, our next item is public comments, items not in the agenda. And I have 6 individuals here that like to speak. And we'll start off with Henry Sapien, Alvarado Sapien, followed by Lucy Cartagena, excuse me. Henry and Lucy.
Mayor, Mr. Henry Alvarado Sapien is not available at the moment.
Okay,
Our
how about
next speaker
Lucy?
will be Lucy Cartagena.
Hello.
Okay, Lucy, you're on.
Hi, I'd like to
speak.
Hello.
You have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Lucy Cartagena, and I'm speaking on items not on the agenda. And I'd like to bring the council and the mayor's attention to the Safe Sleep program that used to be implemented for the homeless. We are at the ending of the pandemic, and the city of Oxnard has yet to even work on homeless issues during the pandemic and now after. Even though we do have this $37 million building coming up, which will be coming up in 7, 5, 6, 7 years, we're yet to be working on issues here and now. We brought in the One Stop at the rescue mission, which provides showers, but we still haven't reached South Oxnard. We're seem to be at an Encompass. We keep talking about Whack-A-Mole, but we keep going back to Helico and cleaning up at $1 million price tag. I want to know, now that we have a new mayor and that we have a new city council sitting there, maybe you should reach out to the council members that have been there previously that actually worked on the winter warming shelter. And what exactly is your guys' plans? Because the Safe Sleep program was in the 5-year homeless plan. So why can't we revisit that without the $60,000 price tag for a 90-day program? And we just had a meeting. I think the Oxnard Police Department just showed that they had a meeting again with the clergy council. There must have been about 15 churches there. Cannot we ask them to open up their gated parking lots so that we can implement the Safe Sleep program? I just don't understand why we're not even touching on that and why we don't want to talk about homeless issues without the rhetoric of that you're working on this and working on that and it's a hard issue. Why can't we do one thing? Just one thing. Let's work on that Safe Sleep program. Let's keep preventing homelessness and let's keep educating the public on homelessness. Just one thing. Let's sit, let's talk, and let's open up dialogue of what works and what can we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Our next speaker is Douglas Portello, followed by Kate Wortman. Portello.
Mr. Portello?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, staff, and public. Tonight, I'd like to touch on the landscaping in the general use areas. And specifically, there's an area that I've been working on as a volunteer with other volunteers for about a year now, a little over a year. And that's Doris Avenue between Patterson and Ventura Road. I've gotten on to Ventura Road, and I was working on Patterson. They had Garcia's come out and do some recent work. And so Doris looks so much nicer. There's folks actually coming now from other neighborhoods, and they're riding their bikes, they're jogging, they're taking walks, and I see them out there and I talk to them. And they're not just from my neighborhood, from other neighborhoods. And before, a lot of people in my neighborhood, they wouldn't even walk on Doris because all the homeless encampments, and they would be getting approached by homeless people, and they were kind of afraid. And so now that that's all been cleaned up, I still have some questions about the irrigation. It's great that the city is picking up the green waste. Again, that's great. A couple Parks Department employees came out on Ventura Road. I was working out there, and they picked up and they did a great job. And I really appreciate that. But my real question is there hasn't been much talk about all the parks improvements, the general landscape improvements, the medians, about what resources are going to be placed for irrigation. There's areas in the perimeter of my neighborhood in Cabrillo that I've been working that, those plants and trees haven't seen water in 2 years. The sprinklers are broken. There's broken sprinklers right now. Over on Doris by Daffodil, there's 2 sprinklers broken. I constantly call and talk to Joe Perez, the park supervisor. I do 311s. I try to get in touch with Kevin Thompson, but he's not returning my calls or my texts anymore. And we're wasting a lot of water. And there's plants that are literally dying. So I just want to know what resources specifically are going to be put to, reclamating the irrigation system, and when can we expect those plants and trees to start getting water? Because if we mow the grass and we do all these other things, that's great. But if those plants and those trees don't get water, they're not going to survive. And the grass is just completely overgrown. I mean, on Patterson between Gonzales and Doris Road, it is just horrible. I mean, it's a code violation. On Doris, I actually went out and bought a lawnmower. I couldn't stand it anymore. I mean, what was beautiful, and Joe says they're 3 weeks before they come and mow that grass on Doris. And that, in 3 weeks, I can't even imagine what that's going to look like. So I don't know what the plan is for continued maintenance on these general use areas. If we have some idea from the Parks Department.
Thank you. Thank you, Douglas. I know the staff is taking note of that. Our next speaker is Kate Wortman, followed by Francisco Gianna. Kate.
Kate Wortman, you may unmute by pressing *6.
Here I am. Did that
Hi,
work?
Kate. You have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I am not one of your residents, so I do appreciate you still being open to us outsiders. I'm a little late to the party on this topic, but I just wanted you to know, my name is Kate Wortman. I live in Fresno, California. And back in July of 2019, my family of 11 people stayed for 1 week at a home rental in the city of Oxnard. My family includes 2 sets of parents in their 70s, my own family of just 3 of us, and my sister's family of 4. So for a total of 11. We had such a great time in your city that we decided to return for our vacation in 2021. Because we have 11 people and we knew exactly where we wanted to stay in Oxnard, we booked our trip back in August of 2020. And it's my understanding that in November of 2020, your city council voted to end the Airbnb stays for over 10 people starting in January. We were not aware of this new law until our VRBO host notified us in April, which then I reached out to the city of Oxnard, the main city website, and wanted to see if our reservations may be grandfathered in, since we had made the reservations prior to the city's question or their decision. It took multiple weeks, actually it took a couple months to get an answer back from the city. And it was kind of more of a just, yeah, we think that it's 10 people. So I'm just here to ask you to take a little minute to ask yourself which of your family members you would leave home. If we have 11 and only 10 can come stay in the house, our VRBO host is wonderful. She's a very nice lady, but she is very by the book and does not want to get fined by the city. And so we respect that. So we're not going to obviously go over our number. So please know that one set of my parents has chosen to stay home in order to allow their kids, myself, my sister, and then the grandkids to all spend time together. While we appreciate, I looked into your city council decision, and while we appreciate the decision to maintain peace and quiet in your rental homes, we have an impeccable rental record and are a super quiet family. So I'm here to officially ask if our reservation can be grandfathered into your policies. And if possible, could we get that in writing so that our VRBO host would feel safe allowing all 11 us to stay in this home that is actually built for more than 11. So that's all, and I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for letting me speak tonight.
Thank you, Kate. Our next speaker is Francisco Gianna, followed by Ray Platel. Francisco.
Francisco Jaena. Yes, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. My name is Francisco Jaena. I'm a resident of Oxnard. My concerns are for the safety. Number one is my house, which is in the corner of C and Roderick, is always experiencing a lot of accidents on that corner. And I would like something to do. I tried some complaints before writing, and I spoke to the former mayor Pro Tem, and they said they want to help, but I never had any help on something to do with that corner. And if you could check with the records, there's a lot of accidents in that because it's a thorough street from Oxnard Boulevard going into Oxnard. You're going to hit C Street and Roderick, and it's not a four-way street, and a lot of accidents there were because people thought it's a four-way street if they're not from Oxnard. So after the car went through, they go straight, they thought it's their turn, and they hit the other car, and most of them hit my residence and one time went into my house. So I'm really concerned on that. If you could help me do something with that, four-way street, or add additional paint red on the, not so expensive, just no parking around that corner, more a bit farther away from the corner, or adjust the signage. I think something has to be done, and to avoid more accidents to happen, especially on my side. And that's one thing I really would appreciate if something would be done to that. And another thing also, as a former commissioner for homeless in Oxnard, and I'm also concerned about the Safe Sleep program, which we have been working with for a long, long time, and nothing has been done. And a lot of homeless that I know before that have cars, and they have problem with that. And I think it's worthwhile to look into that as well. And that's all my concerns, mostly on safety. And thank you for giving me this opportunity, and good evening again.
Thank you, Francisco. Know that our traffic engineer in Oxnard PD took note of that for C and Roderick. Thank you so much. Ray Platel is our last speaker.
Hello?
Yes, Mr. Platel, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, city staff, and the public. Good evening. I was thinking you'd receive a lot of comments tonight about this subject, but I guess I was wrong. But the evening of July the 4th, 2021 was like a war zone in Oxnard. I even believe it was worse than last year. The entire neighborhood reeked of smoke and the smell of gunpowder. Not only is this a nuisance to neighbors, it absolutely mortifies animals. I babysat with my neighbor's dog Sunday evening. It broke my heart to watch this beautiful animal pace around with a tail between the legs. Nothing I did would console the dog. I sent every council member an email about this and including a picture of what happened when the dog tried to get out of his pen. I'm asking you to do something about this. I recognize there is no amount of policing that can quell the activities of an entire city. However, as I've mentioned before, the city of Oxnard can and should coordinate with our neighboring cities and petition the city of Fillmore to cease selling fireworks, even safe and sane fireworks. The city of Fillmore benefits financially while neighboring cities suffer the consequences. If the city of Fillmore truly believes that these sold items will only be used in Fillmore, then I have some swampland that I can sell them also. But will this solve the entire problem? No, it won't. There will always be those who purchase illegal items beyond our borders, maybe in South in Mexico or in Nevada, whatever. But it would help. Just like our border patrol agents find only a small amount of the illegal substances entering our country, every little bit helps. Therefore, I implore you to take any and all necessary steps to mitigate this issue before a repeat on July 4th, 2022. Obviously, additional police officers are not the ultimate answer. I've given you an idea, but I'm sure you can come up with additional ideas. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you so much. Okay, our next item is the city manager's department. This is subject is COVID-19, update from the Director of Emergency Services. And the recommendation is the City Council receive and file an update from Director of Emergency Service on COVID-19 local emergency. And also number 2 is that the City Manager Department is list of manager approved contracts, informational only. According to the recommendation, the City Council receive and file the list of City Manager approved contracts for the period November 20, 2020 through June 30, 2021. Mr. Alex Nguyen, City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, I'm going to go through the COVID-related updates and a few others. At the end of this particular item, I'm going to call on the police chief to give a quick update regarding fireworks. So this slide that's on the screen may be the most urgent update right now, which is the state has made it possible to provide 100% of your back rent. And this is eligible to residents as well as landlords. So the key information is the website right there, housingiskey.com. If you go there, the county has provided all the information so that you can apply for this relief funding. It's also a phone number you can call if you prefer that. It is 833-430-2122. Again, thanks to our representatives in Sacramento, they have provided a fund to pay back rent, 100% of your back rent. And it is open, it's actually past and future. So unpaid rent that you owe, but also for the next several months, I believe. So again, very, very important for everyone who actually needs help with your rent payments, whether you're a tenant and even a landlord can apply. Once again, housingiskey.com or call the phone number 833-430-2122. So if you're behind in rent as a tenant, or if you're a landlord and your tenants have been behind due to the pandemic's economic recession, we implore you to reach out to this resource to have the relief provided. Next, and until it's actually over, it's not over. The pandemic is still with us. So we have a few mobile vaccine clinics here in Oxnard this week and next week. This is, of course, thanks to our partners at the county's public health department. So tomorrow, there will be a vaccination clinic at the Boys and Girls Club on 5th Street in Oxnard, and that's open specifically in the afternoon from 3 p.m. to 6:30 p.m., and they will be providing vaccines for anyone 12 years and up. On Thursday, there will be 2 clinics, one at Ocean View Junior High School, also for people 12 years and older, and that will be from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Another one on Thursday will be at the United Farm Workers Foundation offices at 910 South A Street, and also for people 12 and up. They will be open from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. So again, tomorrow, there's one clinic at the Boys and Girls Club. On Wednesday, there are 2, one at Ocean View Junior High School from 11 to 3, and another one at the United Farm Workers Foundation office from 11 to 6. We encourage anyone who is still in need of your vaccine to try to get vaccinated at those locations. Now, next week, on Monday, July 12th, at the Channel Islands High School at 1400 Raiders Way, there's going to be a vaccination clinic for people 12 years and older from 1:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. Road here in Oxnard. The clinic will be open from 11 to 6 p.m., 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. And that one will only be for people 18 years and up. So those are the pop-up vaccination, mobile vaccination clinics. Now, the more permanent ones during COVID remain open. Their hours have shifted a little bit, so let me review those. So at the North Oxnard Public Health Clinic, which is at 2240 East Gonzales Road, that clinic is open Monday through Friday, 10:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. On Thursdays, it's open till 6:30. At off of Rose Avenue at the Babies R Us building, that clinic is open Tuesday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. And on Saturday, it is open 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. South Oxnard, the county health clinic there on C Street, this is under a tent in the parking lot at 2500 South C Street. They are continued to be open between Monday and Friday, 10:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And finally, the one at Oxnard College is also open, and that is 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And then on Thursday and Friday, it's open 12 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. So those are pretty good extended hours and weekend hours. That site at Oxnard College is not open on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Next thing I want to announce is our fires chief, Chief Alex Hamilton, has been deployed to the tragedy in Surfside, Florida. The International Association of Firefighters has requested his leadership. He is leading a team to provide peer support for first responders at Surfside. Our chief is recognized as the national leader in this field of behavioral health services for the fire service community. This is actually his third deployment, which is completely funded by the International Association of Firefighters.
So, Mr. City Manager, but that's commendable that are that our chief is here.
Very. Yes, and it certainly is a tragedy. So we are proud that he was asked to lead a team, and we are certainly happy that he's available for them. Next is a quick update that I also provided last week. We're just rolling with this in the month of July. We're trying to help Oxnard residents be among the first people to apply for jobs at Amazon. So again, if you're able to do with the smartphone, this information is available on the city's website. You could scan that code and it'll get you the information and sign you up to get more information, or you can go to Amazon. So we're going to be rolling out information about how to apply for those jobs, the kinds of documents and information you'll need. And this is all leading up to a large Amazon jobs fair at the end of July. And then here, I just want to remind everyone, Measure E started officially on July 1st. So it's really kicking in this week. There's been a lot of questions and comments made in the public sphere about why nothing's gotten better with Measure E. And again, I just want to remind everyone, we didn't start receiving Measure E until the very end of June, and the council passed the budget a week ago. And so we're now just beginning to receive revenues from Measure E and taking those revenues and making investments back into the community as directed by the city council. This is another update that we have. It's not related to Measure E, believe it or not, but we're going to start publishing these, I think, every 2 weeks. So you can see here, this is the 311 Green Team. And they are tasked with cleaning up the various sites of illegal dumping. And their work is based on the reports that our residents report using the 311 app. So this is a quick snapshot of the work they performed in the 2-week period between June 13 and June 26. In those 2 weeks, they completed just under 600 work orders. They collected 80 tons of garbage. That's a lot of trash. They picked up 59 refrigerators, picked up 197 mattresses, and also helped to clean up 17 different homeless encampments. Now, again, this is illegal dumping. So it goes without saying that while our staff is proud to perform this work, it would be obviously a lot easier if members of the public did not dump illegally. So part of that is I want to let people know that there are actually resources available to legally and safely dispose of your unwanted items. So you can call the recycling station at Del Norte. The phone number there is 805-385-8060. And we can help you plan and schedule and get things like mattresses and refrigerators taken care of properly. And that would be just better for the entire community. Instead of putting your refrigerators and your mattresses and other garbage out into the public right away, there's actually a way to handle this that keeps everyone happy, including our staff. Next update I have is, and this is just early notification. We will provide legal noticing for this, but we're going to hold our first public hearing to introduce the redistricting process, and that will take place on July 29th here at the final council meeting of the legislative year. And I'm sorry, and that is a Thursday, by the way. It's a scheduled meeting, but it will be on a Thursday, not a Tuesday. So we'll get more information about that out. As everyone may recall, in 2020, across the nation, we conducted the U.S. Census count. And that's something that happens once every decade. It just so happened that in 2020, it occurred alongside with the pandemic. So it was extremely challenging. One of the outcomes of that struggle of doing the count, trying to do the complete count during the pandemic, is that the U.S. Census Bureau is a little bit late with getting us the statistics. We expect to get those, I believe, in September, but we've got to sketch out a plan and a schedule so that we can conduct the redistricting process and get everything done on time. And then when we get the actual census count numbers, the final numbers in September, then we will really have a clear map. One more thing here. This is an update with regard to the work that is going to take place here in the council chambers. Unfortunately, our construction work's been delayed, so it won't begin until August. That is for primarily the asbestos removal that has to happen before we can go into the ceiling and the walls to upgrade the audio and visual infrastructure. So it looks like at this point, we will be holding our meetings remotely in September, and then we hope to be, but also expect to be back in here in October. And hopefully we will see where the pandemic is at. So we'll know better as we get to the beginning of September, what our plans will be in terms of the degree of opening that we will have this building to the general public. So stay tuned for that. And with that, I'm going to call on our police chief to provide a quick update with regard to the fireworks enforcement over the weekend. Chief?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just in brief, I wanted to recap the 4th of July season and the fireworks situation. As you know, it's been a very ongoing topic of discussion in a lot of different forums, particularly during the past several weeks after the Memorial Day holiday. What I can tell you is that it seems that the number of fireworks kind of leveled off to 2019 numbers, which are consistent with previous numbers. Last year we would view that as an extreme anomaly in the number of fireworks activity that we actually had. And there are a lot of reasons that I've mentioned behind that, but our calls for service and the demand levels lowered, but at the same time, we ramped up our deployment this year. To give you an idea, we used drones this year to a greater extent. We also used data-driven deployments based on previous calls for service and complaints. We actually received over 300 tips from our community, which we helped factor into our deployments. We also delivered warning letters, and we delivered over 7 dozen of those to specific locations that we had identified before the 4th. But in short, last year, on the 4th of July on its own, we issued 49 citations, civil citations for fireworks violations. This compares to 42 the previous year. But this is what's very important to note to our community, is that in this approach, we spent a lot of time documenting additional violations. So we have over 100 additional violations pending. So some residents and some tenants plan to get citations in the next week or two for up to $1,000. So we're looking at about a total of 150 citations issued citywide, which is an all-time record for us. And I wanted to thank all the officers that came out. We had over 2 dozen officers just directed to specifically fireworks enforcement, in addition to DUI enforcement and everything else, including Chief Sonstegard and myself that personally observed a lot of the activities out there, and we were taking it very seriously. Obviously, for many members of our community, it's never enough, but the problem is large enough that it warrants everything we can give to it. That's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. So that concludes item 1 on the agenda. On item 2, Mr. Mayor, this is something I try to do twice a year. It's a receive and file. In essence, I've just published the various contracts that I sign for the prior 6 months under my authority. So it's nothing that is necessary in terms of city policy or anything like that. It's just something a practice I've started since I arrived here. So that's it. There's no action needed. I don't know if anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the update. Council members, any questions on item 1 and 2 from City Manager? Perella, I see your, okay, because your little hands up.
I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, our next item, council members, is this is council members to bring up any items of announcement or any brief reports on your activities and potentially any items that you might want to bring for future agenda items. And we have 3 minutes apiece if you'd like to share at this time, council members. Okay, Councilmember Perello, followed by Councilmember Mondragon.
Thank you. And to the residents that suffered with the fireworks, I feel for you. And I appreciate the police chief's report. I'd like to bring to the attention, I often put in calls for issues that need to be addressed, whether it's 311 or directly to Public Works. I attended the Dunes Neighborhood Council formation a bit back, and they had a request on each Beachcomber Street at Harbor Boulevard. They'd requested that the shrubbery be trimmed because as they have to stick their nose out on Beachcomber Street to get onto Harbor Boulevard because the other entrance on Woolley Road is closed because of construction, they've asked to have the shrubberies trimmed. It is yet to be trimmed. But over the weekend, there was a crash that took out the stop sign. I sent the pictures of that in. And a previous weekend, there was a crash that took out the intersection and crashed into a guy's garage on the other side of Harbor. Ladies and gentlemen, that's an issue and an area. You're getting a heads up, literally, and I've sent it in writing and I'm saying it verbally. It's got to be addressed. The second, I would like to thank Mr. Francisco Reyna, who spoke at public comment, and Ms. Cartagena. They were involved in the Homeless Commission. They deserve to be credited when they've put their time in on these things. I'm grateful that we have a fire chief that has the skills to be asked to attend the unfortunate events in Florida. Thank you very much. And we have an assistant chief covering for him. The issues this weekend, I had an opportunity to meet with some of the people that had issues about the maintenance on Vineyard Avenue. The homeowners association, very calm, very pleasant. I hope this could be addressed. I did have the opportunity to show it to Mr. Howling and Mr. Newen, and they showed that. But there is a question with respect to the shrubbery as you come out of the street directly into the parking lot that would go into the golf course. The shrubbery is quite high to the east. And as you stick your nose out and you go to merge to go left, you're going to get T-boned by somebody hauling ass down the street, which that section of Vineyard Avenue has become a place where people test out their tune-ups. They race extensively there. There's been requests for stop signs. I don't know if that will go very far, but I believe it needs to be done. And I will make sure that Mr. Bolcom gets this because these are safety issues. And there's a couple of places where this problem also exists. And I want to thank the city for telling how much trash they picked up. But let us not forget, when the city says they pick up how many refrigerators, ladies and gentlemen, it used to be known that when you're going to dump a refrigerator, you take the door off so some little kid doesn't get trapped in there and suffocate. I mean, these refrigerators left doors up, just out dumped. And it's a tragedy waiting to happen. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Turan, followed by Councilman Madrigal.
Councilman Madrigal had his hand up first, Mayor. I'm willing to let him go first.
You're a gentleman. Councilman Madrigal. Oscar, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that, I was muted. Hope everyone is having a great week so far. First, I want to acknowledge the hard work that staff performed to get the highest rating ever for any California city from a California State Municipal Treasurers Association. Again, thank you to the staff. Second, over the last week, I attended the grand opening of the reopening of the senior center in La Colonia neighborhood, along with the mayor. The new center is actually inside the Colonia Rec on Marquita. I also stopped by and attended the Rose Park neighborhood meeting as they elected a new chair, Mr. Alfonso Arroyo. It was great seeing some of the residents that I had not seen in over a year. And last week, I actually forgot to thank Bike Ventura for having an event in La Colonia to promote a clean mobility demonstration. And lastly, you know, street work continues to be done in La Colonia, as well as they are beginning to work on the new high school on Del Sol. And, you know, other than that, that's it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilman Turan.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to also thank Chief Hamilton from our fire department for his service in the Surfside disaster. It's difficult to put into words the scale of how this is going to affect individuals, families, and that community, but also the far-reaching implications it can have for that area or across our nation for building construction or maintenance. And so for the emotional side of things and for the service side of things, there are people who are stepping up and going over there to help out those who are desperately in need. And I want to thank our fire chief for his service in that respect. Regarding the speaker earlier, I also want to thank him for calling in and looking at C Street and Roderick. I did speak with the traffic engineer previously about C Street and Roderick and C Street and Robert for essentially the same issue that the speaker brought up, which is number one, cars going through there faster than the posted speed limit. And then number two, cars that are at that two-way stop that was mentioned by the speaker, but also on Robert. And having to inch out, especially when there is a car that's parked on the corner and it's difficult to see that how fast oncoming traffic is coming or if they are coming at all, especially when those vehicles are larger vehicles. And that's not just like RVs, but even a full-size pickup truck or a wide vehicle that is parked there makes it difficult to gauge oncoming traffic. So that has been brought to this traffic engineer's attention. I'll check back in with him on that. I really appreciate the speaker calling in on it because it's something that other residents have brought up as well. And I also want to mention that Councilmember Perello and I are working with the County of Ventura on the levy, the SCR1 levy, and looking at that project and how the comment period is open right now for the public on that particular project. We'll be working with them and city staff to hold a community meeting this month during the month of July, during that comment period, in order to inform the public about the history of the project, the history of the levy, where it currently stands, and what next steps are. Be able to give them that information, but county staff and city staff will be on hand to answer any questions the public has and give them information that they need in order to form a well-informed comment that they'd like to provide to the county on this project. And I want to thank Councilor Perello and city staff and the county for their continued efforts on this. During our priorities meeting, even though the levies did not make it to the top priorities in that category, I want to thank, again, Councilor Perello and city staff for continuing to allow us to prioritize that anyhow, because it is an important safety issue for our neighborhoods that are right next to those levees. So I wanted to just mention that. So look toward a flyer coming out for that in the near future. And lastly, I didn't get to mention this at our previous meeting, but I wanted to thank the organizers of the BLM Pride March that happened just a couple weekends ago. I unfortunately was out of town and could not attend, but I wanted to thank them for putting that together and offering a great event of inclusiveness and great meaningfulness for our residents to be able to attend. And I saw photos and videos on social media, and it looked like it was a very great event. But on the flip side, I'd also like to thank staff who really worked very hard to get the technical sides of that together at the request of the organizers of the event. And they really did some great work behind the scenes on that. And so thank you everybody involved for helping that happen for our community. And those are my comments, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I also like to share, that was really an honor for me to be with Councilman Madrigal over at the Colonia for the senior center that opened in Colonia. I want to thank the senior services. It was an excellent program. There's a lot of happy people, a lot of happy seniors that are going to be able to enjoy that senior center there in Colonia. And they really fixed it up really nice. I really appreciated being there. And again, I want to thank people. I hope they had a happy 4th of July and thank our Oxnard PD again for all the hard work that they performed, keeping down the fireworks to the 2019 year. So I would thank again to Oxnard PD for that excellent work. Also, I want to share with the folks that I'm sure concerns with me about Campus Park. I talked to our public works director, and they are going to be mowing that Campus Park, all the weeds out there, so we can show that the city of Oxnard is doing our part to maintain the cleanliness, also number one, in the appearance of Oxnard. And again, as I mentioned, I want to thank our Chief Hamilton for helping out those folks in Florida, and that really is commendable as far as it's the city's concern that we have individuals that they can call upon to assist in a tragedy that happened over in Florida. Thank you for that. And okay, so then I will continue then to the next item, which is the consent items. And I have consent items 1 to 7. And I have a couple of speakers that like to speak on those items. And I think, let me see, it's Madam Clerk, it says case 7. We have Lucy Cartagena and also Eric Fruit that like to speak on what particular items on the consent.
Mayor, Lucy Cartagena is not available at the moment. However, we do have Mr. Eric Fruit on the line.
Okay, Eric, and what item would you like to speak on? Mayor Pro Tem, do you have a Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to ask, I have some comments on K3. I don't know if you want to pull it out for discussion or take it.
Let me go ahead and check. Let me put Eric on first and see, and then we can go with item 3. And also, I see Councilman Perella has his hands up. So Eric.
Mayor, we also just had Lucy Cartagena dial in.
Okay, let's go start off with Lucy then. Lucy, what item would you like to speak on? Do we have Lucy on?
Lucy? Lucy Cartagena?
Hi, I'll be speaking on K3, the donation of the Bearcat.
Let's go ahead. We've got 3 minutes. Lucy.
Okay, you guys. So my name is Lucy Cartagena once again, and my concern is the donation of the Bearcat for the Oxnard Police Department. I feel at this point in time in society's life, we don't need a donation of another militarized vehicle for the city of Oxnard. Oxnard already has, I believe, 2. If not, we have 1. And if you remember, Mayor Zaragoza, the county of Ventura returned militarized items from the state because it set a bad example for the sheriff's department. I believe the city of Oxnard needs to follow suit. If not, keep showing the exemplary example that we are in the city working towards community growth. Now, the problem with having a Bearcat is that it makes it insensitive to the community. Although they are needed and they are used because we do have them, we're not talking about transparency on how much they cost to maintain and how much it costs to man them. It's not something that we are against equipping the police with. It's just something that is not needed at this time. And it's just not needed, period, in any city. So I think that the city of Oxnard needs to keep working on community rapport and keep working on transparency with the community and not bring in any type of military, whether donated or not. We don't need it and we shouldn't use it. And we should always remember that this is not against police. It's for the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have Eric? Yeah. Eric Fruit?
Mr. Eric Fruit?
Hi, I'm also going to be speaking on item K3.
Okay, sir, you have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. My name is Eric. I live here in District 2. Regarding item K3, that item needs to be pulled from the consent agenda. Honestly, it's kind of like reprehensible that it was even added as a consent item. The police department is poised to accept an armored vehicle, a literal tank, city against our community. Oxnard is not a war zone. There's no need for an armored vehicle. All this vehicle is a deadly toy for the police to ride around in and feel invincible and feed into their existing God complex. There's no need for military equipment to be used in civilian settings, as if the general populace is like wild and chaotic animals that require the most sophisticated death machines in order to control. I can, however, think of one usage of the tank that I imagine is a primary reason why OPD solicited this donation. to intimidate people who are speaking out against a police terror that is inflicted on a daily basis on unhoused people, communities of color, low-income households, sex workers, transgender people. It's going to be used to intimidate protesters that OPD does not like or agree with. Why do they not like or agree with them? Because those protesters are pointing out the ways in which the police engage in heinous, depraved behavior. And I'll give you an example. On this day in 2016, Philando Castile, a 32-year-old Black man, was murdered by a police officer in St. Paul, Minnesota during a traffic stop. He was shot at point-blank range in front of his girlfriend and her 4-year-old daughter. This type of police murder doesn't just occur in some faraway cities. It happens in Oxnard too, because the institution of policing is centered around violence and protecting private property rather than actually helping people. Megan Hockaday was killed in her apartment here in Oxnard in 2015 while she was in the middle of a mental health crisis. And this is just one example of how the police terrify people, because they literally kill them. They killed them. They've murdered people in Oxnard. They helped send an innocent man to Pelican Bay for 11 years before he was freed earlier this year. The people who need a tank in order to protect themselves from violence and chaos is actually the public. The public needs an armored vehicle to protect them from the police. You need to pull this item from the consent agenda. It's appalling that it was even decided that accepting an armored vehicle
30
built to
seconds.
assault enemy combat in our city did not merit public discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's all the speakers I have. Mayor Pro Tem, followed by Councilman Perrella.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think some people are missing the point of this agenda item. And if you read the staff report, this is a rescue vehicle. It's not a militarized armored vehicle. It is simply a vehicle that provides protection to get people out of areas where they might be exposed to very hazardous conditions. The department's had a vehicle similar to this for the last 16 or 20 years. I had one person comment that this must be a hidden item, and it's not a hidden item. For years, it was sitting in the police department parking lot. People don't see it because it does not go out on regular routine police work. It only comes out for special events or special needs, which is very, very rare. I've heard other people say that we should reprogram that money and do something else with it. Well, it's not our money. It is a grant from a foundation. And if we don't accept the vehicle, we don't still get to keep the money. The money stays with the foundation that is buying this vehicle. I asked about, the only thing I didn't see in the staff report, and I asked the chief about annual maintenance on this type of vehicle. And he said right now that the department pays about $2,500 a year for general maintenance on the vehicle. It's because it doesn't get a lot of use, but it's readily available should there be a need to do it. I hear comments from people about militarizing the police. The police department probably would prefer not to be militarized, to be perfectly honest, but there are times when things happen that needs a different type of response. And I'll just give you two examples. First one was in 1997, the North Hollywood bank robbery. LAPD responded to a report of a bank robbery. I think it was a Bank of America, but I'm not positive. They were met with two heavily armed persons that were fully covered in ballistic gear from head to toe and firing fully automatic weapons at the officers responding. The officers had shotguns and pistols to respond with. They were outgunned, outmaneuvered, and just completely at a loss. The second one is going to be, it happened 2 nights ago, early July 3rd, about 1:30 in the morning. I believe it was a Massachusetts state trooper pulled over to a couple vehicles that were parked outside of the freeway with their flashers on. And one of the vehicles was out of gas, and they were putting gas into it. Well, they were occupied by 11 people that were a militia group that were heavily armed with their automatic rifles. And when the officers asked about, permits for the weapons and so on and so forth, they all fled into the woods. Now, again, this is a group of people that are dressed like military folks that are heavily armed. The police don't go looking for these types of things to get into. In fact, I think they just should not have to engage those folks. But the fact of our society is that these things are occurring. And it's kind of like the line out of Ghostbusters, the old song, who are you going to call? Well, the police are going to be the first ones to get called. They always are. They always will be, and they will always respond. On those rare events where something like this happens, where they're outgunned, outmanned, they need to have the ability to rely on something should they need it. They're not going to go out and drive it around. It's not a weaponized vehicle. There's no armament on it at all. It simply provides a safe haven for people to be removed from hazardous situations. I hear other people saying, well, you know, we're militarizing our police. Well, they're the first responders. And some people say, why can't you get the military to come in and do this? Well, there's this thing in the law called posse comitatus, which says that military assets cannot be used and on home ground. Now, that was modified about 10 or 15 years ago that allows the president, under substantial threat of imminent hazard or emergency, to activate the military for very brief amounts of time. But that has to go through the president in Washington, D.C. That's, if you're lucky, maybe a 24-hour turnaround. That's the same thing with the National Guard. National Guard, who get trained in this, you don't just pick up a phone and call the National Guard, hey, come on out and help us with this stuff. It takes a whole process of government to do that. It may be 24 to 48 hours before the Guard even shows up. So in that 24 to 48 hours, who are our first responders going to rely upon? They're going to rely upon themselves. We ask them to do a lot. If you look at the videos from 9/11, you'll see people running, and I don't blame them for running. I would have been running also, but the ones that were running in the opposite direction were first responders, police and fire. That's in their nature. That's what they trained to do. They don't give it a second thought. And if we're going to ask them to do this, I think we need to give them the tools, should they need them, to be able to respond in an appropriate fashion. That's what this is. It's a tool, nothing more, nothing less. We're not going to drive it around every day. It probably gets terrible gas mileage. If it gets 3 miles to the gallon, I'd be surprised. So it's not economical to do that. It will replace one that's between 16 and 20 years old that we've had for that amount of time. So, you know, I know that some people are a little bit bothered by this. I personally think that it's a good investment by the Community Foundation. It gives the police department a tool should they need it. And I wholeheartedly pray that they will never need it. But it's easier to not need it and have it there than to need it and not have it there. So I thank you for your time, allowing me, Mr. Mayor. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Councilman Perrella, followed by Chief Benitez.
Yes, on item 3 also, if need be, I'm willing to have this item pulled off the agenda and approve the rest of it. But on this particular item, Mayor Pro Tem has said a lot of the things that are occurred, but I'd like to add a couple of things. One that I know of, one of the callers mentioned a lady that was killed in an action by the police department. He didn't tell you that the lady came after the cop with butcher knives. That's a big deal. And the police officer had no other option. It happened in my neighborhood, South Bank neighborhood. The other parts that come up, there have been questions, well, if we receive this in a grant, what are they expecting to get from us? What's the quid pro quo? And then we have another one of where people are asking questions of, do other police departments in the area have these things? And I've asked that of the police chief, and I hope we give an opportunity to share this, because I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, there's a video. We don't have to look very far. Within the last 6 months, if memory serves me right, at least 2 times, automatic assault style weapons have been used in the south end of Oxnard. 2 of them have been recovered. Others, I don't know if they've been recovered. But I mean, when we have the bad guys running around with that stuff, and I say bad guys knowing the people who raise hell with me. I don't drive around with an automatic assault rifle and shoot it off to, thrill and impress my girlfriend. I don't do that, or to hurt somebody. But that has been happening. And those weapons are on the streets. I would expect the people that work for me and the people that I represent and the rest of the people in the city that are taken care of to be trained and equally protected. And if one of these vehicles can help, and why I'm asking, Mayor, if you'll indulge, if it's available, there's a video showing, and I hope that people look at it and they take a real good look. This isn't to help the rich guy, the poor guy, the homeless guy, the home housed guy, the guy in the north, the east, or west, or the south. This was used, and there's a video of it in our city where they rescued a family that was under threat of serious violence, and they didn't get hurt. And it was because they had this vehicle. I don't think I want my guy driving up in a Toyota and going, hey, please, I'll help you. We're bulletproof. That's the whole purpose of this thing. And to the goodness of the individual that applied for the grant, and we were fortunate to get it, we would be out of our minds not to take this. And some of the people that are against this are friends. But God help us, if there ever happens that you need this to protect your loved ones, who are you going to call? Brian McDonald's right. Who the hell are you going to call? Me? I don't have any weapons in my car. That's it. I hope we can let the police chief, Mayor, when this is done, maybe there's something he can share, because if you can't share it now, I think it should be shared with the entire public so they get to see we're not a bloodthirsty group of cops going around killing people. That's not this city. The past chief, when we had the Black Lives Matter comment, he mentioned at one time the police department had gone through and there had been people that used to work for the police department that no longer do. I'm very proud of the people that run in our police department and lead our police department. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, and maybe potentially we can agendize that video. But Chief, you'd like to share a couple of words on this item?
Yes, certainly. Actually, I would start by saying that Mayor Pro Tem McDonald covered a lot of the talking points that I think are very important in this discussion, but I think there are some clarifications that are necessary. This particular piece of equipment can actually have connotations for certain people, and it may actually have a negative response based on, maybe I can explain a few things about this. Number one is that one of the speakers mentioned that this was military surplus equipment. This is not military surplus equipment. That is often conflated with what are called the MRAPs. They're 18-ton large mine-resistant armored personnel carriers. This is not that. This is what we typically see in agencies of this size. It's essentially an armored 5-ton armored car that is built on a Ford F-550 Super Duty truck chassis. Okay. This vehicle is a replacement to a 16-year-old piece of equipment that we acquired in 2005. And this is something that we needed to have. The police department did not solicit this. What happened was one of our officers had a great deal of initiative and wanted to make a difference with our department, realized that we needed to replace this piece of equipment, wrote a grant to a private foundation, received the money, and here we are. It's a very good opportunity to save the city money. So very, very, very important to note that this is not a tank. This is not, it does not have weapons. One thing that's very important to note is this piece of equipment, I heard some acknowledge that there is some degree of necessity for it. It has not been a secret either. I saw one of the comments from one of the persons about this online, is that we've had this type of equipment for years. We take it, we do not deploy it on routine patrols. We deploy it specifically when it's needed. Bottom line is we do not overuse it. And it's not been a secret. We actually take it to public demonstrations where people can actually see what it is. They can climb on it, get inside of it, and see what it's all about. It's not used for routine patrols, and we use it very sparingly. This type of vehicle has saved a number of lives, and the example that Councilmember Perello refers to an incident that happened 5 years ago in Lemonwood, when an armed man had fired a weapon at a police officer, had run into an apartment on El Dorado, into a family that didn't know him. This terrified family ran upstairs into their bedroom and locked the door. And it is a vehicle like this. This is exactly like the classic example of what the purpose of this vehicle was to get that family to safety. It pulled up to the second floor, and the family was able to safely evacuate from that apartment with nobody being hurt. So I could go on and on about this, but I think there's a lot of misperceptions about people. And Mayor, I don't believe we are able to show the video unless we agendize it. Is that correct?
That's correct. We can potentially look at that later.
If you can, you'll see it on social media. It's on the Oxnard PD's Facebook page. But anyway, important to note. And the bottom line is that this is a piece of equipment that helps keep people safe.
One of
Chief,
the things,
do other communities in the county have any of these?
Councilmember Pirelli, yes. Every other agency of medium size has this. Ventura PD has one. Simi Valley has one. I believe the Sheriff's Department has 2 of them. And if we were to not replace this, what we would just simply end up doing would be to check their availability and beg them to use it for our own emergency operations, which is not a practical operation.
Thank you.
Chief, I'd like to mention too that in the past, when you've had pre-COVID, that they have events here at Plaza Park, that unit was there, you know, and the kids would jump into it and so forth. They had a lot of fun to it. I know that Lucy mentioned that the county had a unit. The county had some military equipment that the sheriff got rid of at the time, if you remember that. But the unit that they have now is non-military one, so which I think is important that people understand that. But it's more of a safety issue for police officers, like requiring some type of event that was mentioned by our council members, but it's non-military. And I remember going over to the Plaza Park and kids running up and down and the families taking pictures and so forth. So that's basically more for the protection of our personnel and also the public, which I think is extremely important that our constituency understand that. Thank you. And Councilman Tehran, you have a question or comment before we continue?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple of questions, and perhaps the chief can touch on these. So I'm just wondering, is this, just for clarity, this is going to be in addition to, or is this going to be replacement of the existing vehicle we have? And then my other question is, how does this vehicle compare to, say, armored vehicles that are used for cash recovery and transportation by like Brink Security or those who transport those types of, who transport cash?
So long story short is that the vehicle that we have is 16 years old. It's pretty much reached its end of life. We will need to make a decision of whether it is cost effective for us to even continue its operation. It's an older model. It's considered to be, it's starting to develop mechanical problems. So the chances are very likely we will retire it. However, there is a possibility we may hold it in reserve as a spare in case we need it, but it wouldn't be typically deployed. It would sit in storage at our Sturgis facility. It is a little bit, it is very similar to an armored truck. It essentially is just that. It is, like I mentioned, it's a Ford F-550 Super Duty truck chassis with armor plating and hatches. Again, it does not have any weapons on it. It is not an offensive piece of it. It's not meant for offensive operations. It's meant for protection and protection from ballistic rounds.
Thank you. And my last question is an administrative one, Mr. Mayor, and I don't know if the police chief or the city manager can chime in, but on our agenda and in the staff report, this item did not originate in committee. And I'm just wondering why it didn't go to the Public Works Committee first and what the process is for things that go to committee versus those that do not.
Mr. City Manager.
Yes, Council Member. This one essentially, we're accepting a donation, a contribution. And I mean, that's essentially the answer.
A contribution, yeah.
Yeah. But
Mr. Mayor, if I can make a comment, please.
Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
This would have come to Public Safety and Committee, and a while back among the committee members, we had a discussion where our preference was, and there was consensus on this with all 3 committee members, that if grants come to us where there is no monetary buy-in and no commitment on behalf of the city, it's just money that comes to us, that the committee felt it wasn't necessary to see it, because we're not going to turn it down anyway. We're going to say, sure, go ahead. There's no strings attached. There's no ties. There's no burden on any fund of the city. So we felt that it would make the process go faster. Now there's a commitment on part of the city in terms of a match or something else, then yes, it would have gone to committee. But like I said, this was the request of the committee about a month ago, that these types of requests where there's no tie-in to a financial drain to the city, that they just go straight to council and allow council to make that decision.
So contribution, donation, that's okay.
Yes, well, I want to make sure that if there's anything else Councilmember Tehran wants to know, the protocol for which items go to committee and what have you, I can present that to you. We have those policies. So I want to double check before I make a final comment about this item if Councilmember Turan has any other questions.
Councilmember?
No, thank you. That concludes my questions. I just want to state that I appreciate the explanation from everybody, and then Mayor Pro Tem as well. Thank you for that explanation on the grants or contributions that go to committee. I would just like to state for the record that at somebody's discretion in the future, when we have items like this, that certainly I appreciate people calling in and voicing their opinions on this now or on social media prior to this. But if we have things that the public certainly has interest in, if there's an ability to see if that warrants going to committee for the discussion for the public to be aware of, I think that would be great. Otherwise, I appreciate the explanation on that, and I'll look toward further discussion with the city manager on protocols for what goes to committee and what doesn't. Thank you for the time, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. Councilman Perrello.
When I spoke, I said that I would be willing to approve the consent agenda and pull this item for discussion because Mr. Turan, Councilmember Turan is correct. We don't know often what the public's going to get very livid about until the agenda comes out. And by the time the agenda comes out, it's already been placed. So I would just like to let the public be aware of that.
I think
there is an item, there is the opportunity to pull it off consent and we deal with it one-on-one.
Well, I think potentially, I think they were, Ron, you were talking about future agenda items. Is that correct? And that's my understanding. So,
but Mayor, my question is, maybe you can enlighten me. What future agenda items do you think we should not, if they don't go to committee, should be off the consent agenda?
So,
I mean, anything having to do with police or fire or levies?
Mr. City Attorney, can you go ahead and...
That would be a different discussion for when you talk about perhaps when you update your procedures manual for that kind of generic determination on what goes to committee or not.
Okay. Let me just say a couple of things. First of all, on the process, look, on staff, we do our best to anticipate these things, but the way the council meetings work is you have the discretion to do exactly what you're doing right now, which is hold the discussion. It was pulled for discussion. So that's happening. So I think that part of the process works fine. I just want to make one more comment that's actually indirectly, but related to this item. As you may recall, when we were discussing, when we were updating the city council's 5-year priorities, in that both the presentation, the staff report, the PowerPoint, and the discussion, I highlighted a couple items that were at the top of my personal list as your city manager to achieve in the next 5 years. And one of them was to go back and redo our emergency preparedness plan, to have a very robust, modern emergency preparedness plan. And one of the things I intend to do, which we haven't done here, is to include in both in our hazard mitigation plan and in our city's own emergency preparedness plan, as well as our outreach to the community. I want to include a section so that across the board, not just police and fire, that all public employees and the community are prepared to address mass shootings. It's something we hope never happens.
That's right.
But if you look at what's been happening across the country, unfortunately, statistically speaking, it's just a matter of time. Just this weekend alone, the 4th of July weekend, I believe there were over 230 people in this country who died from homicides, and I think there were over 600 people shot. So with regard to that, I can tell you I'm very, very happy that we have this rescue vehicle that's going to replace the aged out one that we had been using in the past. That's exactly the kind of incident that this vehicle could be crucial in saving lives and rescuing people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. So we have good discussion, and we can surely look at that item in the future.
Mayor, I will move in for consent in its entirety.
Okay, good. Mayor Pro Tem made a motion. Do you have a second?
Second.
A second by Madrigal. Roll call.
Mayor Pro Tem McDonald.
Aye.
Councilmember Perrello.
Yes.
Councilmember Basua.
Aye.
Councilmember Madrigal.
Aye.
Mayor Zaragoza.
Yes.
Councilmember Turan.
Yes, and again, I'd like to thank the members of the public who've weighed in on this.
Councilmember Lopez.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, council members and members of the public and staff. Our next item is reports. The City Manager Department, the subject's introduction of the American Rescue Plan Act, local government recovery decision, making a timeline. The recommendation that the City Council receive and file this informational report about the city timeline to make decisions on investments of the American Rescue Act local government recovery funds. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I hope anyone who's interested in this has had the opportunity to watch the video presentation that I recorded. It was only, I think, about 12 minutes long. Let me make a couple of introductory remarks to build upon that presentation, which again, we can't play here tonight. It wasn't very long, but I hope it covered most of the points. So let me first remind everyone, so the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, was part of what the federal government and the White House did in terms of providing relief, continued relief throughout this pandemic. And it was of the various bills that came out of Washington during the pandemic, the ARPA was the first one that actually provided direct relief to local government for our needs and purposes. So we're very grateful to all of our representatives in Washington who made that possible. There were 6 broad categories. We talked about this before, but I will review them. Supporting public health response, replacing public sector revenue loss, investments in water and sewer infrastructure, address the negative economic impacts of the pandemic, provide premium pay for essential workers, and invest in broadband infrastructure. So those are the 6 broad categories. The Federal Treasury Department issued what they titled preliminary final guidelines a couple months ago. So we've all been working off of those. I have our staff here. We have our Deputy City Manager, Sherry Klima, Adam Smith from the City Manager's Office, and Deputy City Attorney Jason Zaragoza. They have all been attending various webinars provided from different sectors of the public sector, different parts of the public sector, in trying their best to interpret the Treasury's guidelines. Now we expect the final guidelines to be issued in August. Hopefully there won't be any significant changes, but you never know, there may be. Next thing I want to remind everyone is that in addition to the American Rescue Plan funding for the city, by the way, for us, it's $59 million, and we've received the first half of that payment already, and we'll get the second half expected next May. Now I want to talk about other available funding. And the reason I want to do this is as the council proceeds in the next several weeks, but also when you start to actually make the decisions, most of the decisions in September, I want you to bear in mind the various other funds that have been made available, both from the federal, state, and county government. So I want to review those very quickly. From the federal government, there have been funds put aside and provided for Paycheck Protection Program. So far, that has totaled $795 billion across the nation. There are economic injury disaster loans. The SBA Restaurant Revitalization Fund, they put aside almost $30 billion for that, as well as the SBA Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, $16 billion for that, as well as employee retention credit for tax credits for employers up to $28,000 per employee. The feds have also provided stimulus payments for residents. The first round of CARES Act provided up to $1,200 per adult and $500 per qualifying child. In the second round, it was $600 per adult and $600 per qualifying child. In the third round, included in the American Rescue Plan, up to $1,400 per adult and $1,400 per qualifying child. There were also funds set aside via the Community Development Block Grant Funding, CDBG, hundreds of millions of dollars there, including almost $1 billion for rental assistance. Our state government has set aside $2.5 billion for businesses, as well as $6.2 billion for tax cuts over the next 6 years to small businesses. And then our county has already implemented $50 million in rental assistance to tenants and landlords here in our county. Also, $60 million in business assistance grants coming through the county. And there is also through the county $120 million in funding for supporting homelessness. And the county also implemented $6.65 million in direct funding to farm workers for a farm workers assistance program. The state of California, recently, the governor and the legislature have set aside money. There's a lot more money coming from the state. What we're looking towards is $8.1 billion in stimulus checks at $600 for qualified families, and also including undocumented families will be eligible, and with kids will be eligible for an additional $500. It's also $1.5 billion in direct grants to small businesses. Again, this is in addition and separate from the federal SBA program. This is coming straight from the state to small businesses. $5.2 billion to help low-income renters. And we talked about this earlier in the COVID update. The state is providing $5.2 billion again to help pay 100% of residents back rent. Landlords can also apply to that fund. And there is another $1 billion being set aside for new grants to workers who lost their jobs during the pandemic. The state is, this is one of the few silver linings I find from the pandemic. The state is setting aside up to $12 billion to tackle the homeless crisis in California. We have been advocating, hopefully, finally, to receive those funds directly so we can attack the problem here in our backyard and our front yard in the city of Oxnard, rather than constantly seeking grants and funding via the county or the state or the feds. Given that this is such a California crisis, we're certainly hoping some of that $12 billion will be made available directly to cities that are confronting the homeless crisis. Also, for infrastructure, the state is looking to implement $7 billion for broadband infrastructure. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later, as well as $11 billion to invest in upgrading the transportation system. There's also money to combat wildfires and climate change, $2 billion for emergency preparedness investments. We will obviously apply to those grants. $3.2 billion to accelerate the zero emission vehicle goals. I'm hoping that in that part of the bill, there'll be some grants for us to go after in terms of charging stations, and some other modernization projects with regard to reducing vehicle emissions. $1.3 billion investment to prepare for extreme heat, sea level rise, and environmental justice priorities like oil well capping, toxic site cleanup, hopefully such as Halico, and pollution control. And then finally, the governor is asking for $5.1 billion in drought response and water resilience, and we certainly hope to be able to apply for those funds as well. Now, that's just to paint the picture for you about the various relief funds being made available from the feds to the down to the state, and a little bit from the county. There's also another event going on in Washington right now, which is as of the end of last week, there are 5 infrastructure measures in play in Washington. So Congress, the House and the Senate, as well as the White House, they are negotiating 5 different ways to pass a major infrastructure bill for the nation. They're focusing on surface transportation as well as water infrastructure, specifically for clean water and drinking water. Also, they are looking for funding for highways, transit, ports, and airports. So hopefully they will get through those negotiations and debates this summer, and we may have something, if not at the end of the summer, then hopefully when they're back in session in the fall. Again, that's just to keep in the back of your minds, or keep at the top of your notes, that there is indeed a lot of money that has been made available for various sectors of society during this pandemic, and there's more coming both from the state and the feds. Now, with that, I also want to remind you that you've already made a couple of early decisions with regard to this, how to invest this funding. One, of course, was the grocery hero pay. And you've also given me the green light to begin discussing and exploring with our labor groups the possibility of gratitude pay for city employees. And then there's one more thing that I would like to do, and I want to bring it up now, although there's no decision to be made, but it's something that I believe is timely, which is I'm hoping that I can convince you to use ARP fundings so that the city can refresh all of the crosswalks at all of the schools in Oxnard.
Excellent.
And what I'd like to do is I'm going to go ahead and do that this summer. And in part because I want to get it, as much of it done as possible before school is back in session. It would be terrible to do this as the new school year begins and kids and families are walking to and from school. So there are a couple of aspects here. One is, again, just doing a quick refresh of everywhere where there are crosswalks and perhaps a few places where they have faded into oblivion, where they can't even be seen. So we want to do that, but we also want to follow that up with a program in the next year, working with schools and community to not only are we going to refresh the actual crosswalks themselves, I want to refresh our routes to school plans for each of our schools and work with the school administration. So that would be probably a year-long process, but we want to put an investment into that too. So to do all of the above, refresh all of the crosswalks, and then work towards refreshing the safe routes to school. You know, that's used to be a name of a program, but I just use that phrase because it makes sense. I believe we can do all that for between $500,000 and $600,000. Now, if it turns out that this would not be an eligible bucket of investment out of ARP, then I would ask that at that point, then we would just take it out of our reserve. I think this is something that is important and necessary to do. And timing wise, it's something I'm going to do this summer. Now, the painting part, the restriping and refreshing and touch up, we believe we can get all the schools done for under $150,000. So I have the authority to do that in terms of the expenditure limits. So I just want to give you that heads up. And that will be my preliminary projection is we're looking at approximately 231 crosswalks. So it may end up being a little bit more than that, but we'll bring an update to the Public Works Committee and to the council in the fall. All right, the next thing I would like to discuss with regard to the ARP funding.
Mr. City Manager.
Yes.
I think that last item that you mentioned is extremely important, to paint all the crossings for our children. I know we've discussed that before, but right before school starts again, I think it's an excellent program, a Safe Route to School program was used very effectively in the county too, that really helped stripe, and put additional safety for our children. I just want to assure that that's really important for all of us.
Thank you, sir. Next thing I want to review is just kind of what I'd recommended as, I'm sorry, Councilmember Perello has his hand up, sir.
Thank you. The school crossing, that's like a no-brainer. But before we get too far down the road, I'd like to get an explanation on this because I'm asked this continually. It's been mentioned twice tonight. 100% of the residents back rent, and landlords may also apply. Is there going to be strings that the residents back rent goes back to pay the landlord? Because I'm getting asked and I have no idea. Who can answer that question?
Our general knowledge is that a tenant, for example, can apply, fill out the application, provide whatever information is needed, and then the payments go to the landlord.
Thank you.
And the county has more information on that too, Ben.
Yes, all the information is there at, I think it was, what was that, Housing is Key?
That's right.
Right. Okay, so next what I want to do is just go over some ideas in terms of how we approach this. First, and I know this is sort of stating the obvious, but I think it's important that we all keep in mind that this $59 million is not money we were expecting. I was certainly throughout the pandemic hoping for some sort of direct relief. We never knew if that would happen or how much it would be. So I think it's important for all of us to remember that this process, while it's not going to be easy, I hope we all keep in mind that it is overall a positive process. Second thing I ask people to think through is that this particular component of the federal stimulus is actually designated for local government. Again, as I reviewed all those other buckets of funds that have been made available across the nation via the federal government and the state government, and trickling through the county as well, that there's been a lot of money. I mean, you heard me review all those funds, and most of them were in the billions, as in billions. So I want you to keep that in mind, that there are many, many needs across the community, and many of them either have been or are being addressed by higher levels of government. Third is also an obvious thing, but important for everyone to keep at the top of your mind, which is this is one-time funding. So we don't want to start a program with these funds that we would have to sustain year after year. The best thing to do with one-time spending, one-time money is for one-time spending. There are always exceptions to that rule, but that is a good rule. Next is in thinking through, how do you make these choices? Do we just put a large chunk of the money behind one project and really advance that one project, or do you spread it across all the many needs that we have here in the city? At next week's committee meetings, each committee will be reviewing the same initial list of preliminary investment recommendations from staff. You will see we have more needs that we are going to recommend than the $59 million can provide for. And then the last thing I asked people to think through is trying to make investments in items that not only help us recover from the pandemic, but also have some future potential for future growth and improvement. All right, and then one more thing I think I want to discuss, which is the large infrastructure projects and broadband. So what you won't see in our recommendations are large infrastructure projects or broadband, in the sense that, again, there is work being done in Washington for another large stimulus package focused on infrastructure. So I expect there will be some amount of funding coming out of there. We'll wait and see what pots they put the various funds in and what we can apply for, or perhaps it's possible we may get something directly. You never know. Now, with regard to broadband, we thought about this a lot, and there are two things that came to my mind. One is the state itself has already designated up to $7 billion for broadband infrastructure investment. So there's going to be a very, very, very healthy chunk of money coming from Sacramento for that, and we should wait to see how that plays out. The other thing with regard to broadband infrastructure is, and I mentioned this at a few council meetings ago, is I am uncertain that we as a municipal government should take on providing what is often considered the middle mile infrastructure. And I wouldn't want to tackle any such project without full participation of the internet service providers as well as the school districts. I don't think it's appropriate for us, for example, to be building Wi-Fi infrastructure in our parks in the hopes that that will help kids get better access to internet, because that's just the piece of the infrastructure that doesn't actually provide the internet service. And I think it's high time for the internet service providers to do their fair share and provide quality internet service to all of our neighborhoods. And there's still a struggle with internet service providers redlining communities. So if we fill that gap, it seems to me like we would be rewarding them for the redlining of those services. And there's no guarantee that the end user would actually receive the actual internet service. So we're not prepared to make any recommendations in that arena right now. Again, I want to wait and see the $7 billion from Sacramento, how that's going to be invested and divvied up, as well as figuring out how to compel the internet service providers to provide their fair share. I look at internet service as a fundamental infrastructure requirement now for just society in the United States. So if we think about it the same ways we think of electricity and gas and water and sewer, should be provided for everyone, not just neighborhoods that can pay for the faster speeds. So with that, I will stop there for now and see if we have questions, comments, or discussion from the council. And again, we've got our staff who've been attending those webinars. They may jump in to respond to your questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Councilmember Tehran.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. City Manager, for that information. I recognize this is fully an introduction and a receive and file item. I'm just wondering if you wouldn't mind reiterating for the benefit of the public what initial restrictions have been placed on this funding from the Treasury Department.
Okay, so I will start, and then I'll see any of our staff want to jump in. So it's interesting, and it depends on who's interpreting it. So their preliminary guidelines lay out various rules for each of those 6 broad categories. Now, there are a couple of very, very firm restrictions that they placed. One is we can't use those funds for any of our pension obligations. I have a feeling that was in Washington considered the California rule. And 2 is we can't use it to pay off debts in terms of really, really hard restrictions. Now, within those 6 broad investment categories, there are guidelines, but again, some of them are still vague, and some of them we believe provide a lot of flexibility, and others vague.
Thank you. And when you say debts, I'm assuming that any kind of legal settlements or judgments would be included in that as well.
Yes.
Or for reserves, for that matter, to them.
Right. Oh, that's right. And we can't use it to restore reserves.
To restore reserves, yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. That was my question.
Thank you. Other council members, any other questions? If Councilman Perrella?
Of the staff, whichever one's in whatever interest, I'd like to hear from each one of them. What have you guys here? What's your take? What can you fill us in on? What have you picked up that you can share with the full council?
Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, Councilmember Perrello. This is Jason Zaragoza, Deputy City Attorney. So to kind of piggyback on what the city manager just said, so the categories that we definitely have ineligible uses established in the interim final rule are federal matching requirements, pensions, so you can't replenish pension programs, financial reserves, rainy day funds, and outstanding debt. Throughout the rule, there are additional restrictions that are set forth. So, you have to review the rule and seek guidance if there's any questions. But the interim final rule is not expected to be finalized until August. So at that point, we'll be able to actually read through the rules in greater detail and know exactly what the limitations are. Currently, there are 6 broad categories that the city manager's already gone over, so I don't think there's a need to rehash that. However, in the latest webinar that I attended, there was from the National League of Cities some good communication apparently between members of various cities represented through that organization and the U.S. Treasury, where there have been direct questions asked about eligible uses, and they've gotten direct responses. So we're tapped into that as well. So if we have any questions on eligible or ineligible uses, we can use that resource for direct responses as to the eligibility of those uses.
A follow-up, Mr. Zaragoza. Do you find that the information is being shared freely?
Yeah, Councilmember Perrello, I would say so. I mean, again, right now it's an interim final rule, and there's actually a process wherein agencies are able to seek additional guidance. Is this an eligible use or not? And they're getting direct responses. The FAQ is being updated on a regular basis. That's posted on the U.S. Treasury's website regarding the use of these funds. So I would say yes. I mean, there's a lot of information that's in the interim final rule. So it is sort of tough to kind of boil down to, okay, what exactly is here? Where are the eligible uses? Is this a broad category or is it a restricted category? But yeah, I think that there is enough information out there right now to make those sorts of determinations. And again, the rule will be finalized in August.
Thank you. It was enlightening. Is there any other department head that has attended that could fill us in on what they've heard?
Hi, Councilmember Perrello, Adam Smith, City Manager's Office. I'm not a department head, but one thing I would want to add on to what the city manager and Mr. Zaragoza spoke about was just the gap in between issuing the interim final rule, which is what we're working on now, and when the rule goes final in August. The gulf there, the time period is for Treasury to receive public comment from cities, citizens throughout the nation. So once the final rule goes final, if there's any changes that we see it's most likely due to feedback that they've received from throughout the country. So we're keeping a close eye on that when that's issued.
Mr. Smith, thank you very much. Is there any recommendation that we're getting from management about the council should weigh in or the public should weigh in on requests or changes?
Mr. City Manager, no.
I'm just letting the staff answer.
Okay.
I kind of like this.
I know we have some questions from Councilmember Lopez also. So, Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you. Or if anyone else going to answer?
Yeah, Bert, can you repeat that question, please, Mr.
Yeah, is there, pardon me, Mr. Smith, is there any recommendations that the staff has got for the council to make a request for, or to share with the public, for the public to weigh in and make a request if they're receiving public comments on items, do's or don'ts?
One item that we're kind of looking at closely is one of the allowable uses with the American Rescue Plan is replacing public sector revenue loss. And the Department of the Treasury gives a kind of confusing formula that they want us to use. They want us to measure our revenue losses during COVID on a calendar year basis. But as you all know, and a lot of the cities throughout the nation are on a fiscal year, July 1st to June 30th. So there's been a lot of chatter throughout municipalities across the nation on seeing if Treasury will change their formula to allow cities to measure their revenue on a fiscal year instead of a calendar year basis. So that's a big one.
Thank you. If there's, I mean, you want me to write something or ask, I got no problem getting down on my knees and asking.
So, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, Councilmember Perrello, comments and questions are due on the interim final rule July 16th, and they're being accepted on a rolling basis until that due date. So there's a web portal that's set up, and we can get that information out prior to July 16th. But they've been accepting comments and clarifications through the U.S. Treasury's official website.
And we are submitting a comment with regard to the fiscal year versus the calendar year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Was there any other head that was attended meetings that's going to share something? I see Emilio and I see Ashley. I don't know if they were, are they involved?
Council member, this is Sherry Klima. I've been involved, but I just don't have anything to add that the city manager didn't already say.
That's fair. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you, Mayor, and the rest of my colleagues for the questions asked. I think this is definitely a very unique time for the city, and compared to other cities, we're definitely receiving a greater amount, but I know that is considered as part of our population of the city. So there's not exactly a comparison to what other cities are receiving, but either way, 59 million or a little less than 57 now that we'll be discussing seems like it's a lot, but I imagine with the need, the possibilities of where we can use the funds, it's going to run pretty quick. So I know the city manager mentioned that we'll be discussing this a little bit more in the committee meetings next week. So I'm just wondering if by that you mean there will be any possible recommendations or options for the council to start considering. Before you answer that, I did notice in the timeline that was provided in the staff report, we won't make final decisions until the fall. So if you can just share a little bit more about what that process will look like in the next couple of weeks, because the fall is right around the corner.
Yes, thank you. So next week at the committee meetings, you'll all look at, and basically it's a list that's an Excel table of what all the department heads and the city manager's office have determined that we would like to recommend. Again, it's going to be much more than the $50+ million. But we're going to be recommending items that fit within the 6 broad categories. And then what we're hoping is at the committees that each committee will be looking at the same list, but that you'll have discussions. And we're hoping that at each committee, certain items will percolate to the top. And then on July 29th, we'll have a full council discussion of the same recommendations. And then in August, we don't have any council meetings, but in August, we will, again, get the final rules. So we'll make sure there are no significant changes that would alter anything that we have on the table. From the council meeting of July 29th, we'll assemble the information and hopefully we'll start to get a clear picture of what you all want to see in total, but perhaps, well, however you want to frame it, whether it's per broad category or just in total. And then we'll bring that back in September for you to make actual decisions, which we don't want to really do with the bulk of the money until we know what the rules, if anything strange happens.
Thank you. And I do have a follow-up question about the decision-making. Do we have to decide at one time the full expense or where the distribution of the money? Or is this something that we have like a year to figure out? Do we have to decide all at once, or can we do a little bit out of time?
Fantastic question. You have discretion in some time. I think, so we know the money comes in 2 tranches. The first one we received, and we know that for infrastructure projects, they want the funds, I believe, encumbered by 2024, but they need to be spent by 2026. And for other programs or projects that you want to invest in that aren't major capital projects, then it has to be all done, I think, by 2024. But we do have time. So what we present to you in terms of suggestions, you don't have to pick out all $50-some million at once. You definitely have time.
But the numbers can be encumbered by that time.
By 2024.
24, right?
Yeah. So it's so we don't have forever, but we don't have to make all the decisions at once. You can make them in chunks. No pun intended.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Yep. Before we go into Madrigal, the question I have is, are we going to get potentially more money or less money?
I don't think it will be more. I'm concerned that it may end up being less. I know that there, in some of the negotiations in Washington, there's some effort to push part of what would be the new infrastructure bill, to push that off on the existing American Rescue Plan Act. So it could be an interesting scenario where they say, for your second tranche of your money, cities use that for infrastructure. So I've read some of those articles discussing that that's part of the negotiation. So hopefully we will get more and not less.
Yeah, thank you. Councilman Madrigal.
Thank you. And I know that we're still a ways away from making a final decision, but just a little bit back towards the actual presentation. On slide 3, I do have a few questions on the qualified census tract. I know it was part of the presentation, but just for clarity, what does the qualified census tract mean? For those that have not seen the presentation, either on video or just the PowerPoint itself, about, I would say, anywhere from 60 to 75% of the city is what is known as a qualified census tract. What does that exactly mean?
Good question.
All right, let me see if one of our staff wants to jump in here because we had this conversation. Adam, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Councilmember Madrigal. The qualified census tract is where 50% of the households in that area have incomes below 60% of the area median gross income.
Okay, thank you. As a follow-up to that, because a large portion of the city is in that particular section, and I'm pretty sure it's a large section compared to the rest of the county. Is that part of the reason why we're getting so much more funding than other mid-sized cities in the county?
So I don't know if that was a major aspect. I actually think it's the calculation was more on population numbers, but with the ARP fundings, part of what the guidelines talk about is that we can justify easier investments in low income areas. So these presumptively eligible activities span programs directly addressing public health, social services, education, childcare, and housing insecurity. A qualified census tract for such services is defined as in what Mr. Smith just spoke about as any census tract in which at least 50% of households have an income less than 60 as in 60% of the area median gross income, or which has a poverty rate of at least 25%. So I think the idea there is, again, we'll wait for the final guidelines, but is if you're choosing to make an investment in a qualified census tract, then it's hopefully within the 6 broad categories, it's presumed that it's eligible.
Okay. Just kind of continuing, because I know I saw the preliminary funding and I know it did change from that original funding source, but we were getting about 5 times more money than any other city in the county. And we're not 5 times bigger than either Thousand Oaks or Simi Valley or Ventura for that matter as well. But whatever it is that we do, I know it's one-time money. So, it's one of those things where, as long as it benefits our residents, I am perfectly fine with this, but we should be looking at these particular areas to at least put in some of the money into. Thank you.
And potentially half of the city qualifies for that, according to your map, right?
Yes.
Okay, council members, any additional information on this item? Councilmember Perrello?
Yes, it was mentioned that we're going to go to committee next. We're all going to be voting on the same list of priorities.
Not voting because we don't want to make
prioritizing.
We're just asking you to have an open discussion.
Discussions.
Again, not only amongst each other at the committee, but hopefully also receiving public input. And then we'll have a large group conversation at the with the full council on July 29th, and hopefully getting some public input as well.
Okay, and I saw we have somebody from the Treasury Department on board. This funds that we've just gotten is segregated from our general funds?
Yes.
What percent have we been able to get on this big chunk of money?
I'm sorry, what do you mean, what percent?
What percent, what are we earning on this big chunk of money? This is a lot of money to be sitting in a bank account.
Oh, I don't know. I'd have to check with our Treasury staff. I don't know.
I'm sure we're going to get people asking us that, so I'd appreciate if you send that information to all the council. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
Okay, council members, any additional questions? If this is an information item, this is a last item on the agenda. If we have nothing else, then we're going to adjourn our meeting for this last item. Thank you so much.
Not all.
Thank you.